Hello and good evening, Shortcuts. This is Stephen here with video one for Wednesday, September 27th. For those of you who are new to Shortcuts, price list will go out at 9 p.m. on Wednesday evening. First come, first serve, and this is your heads up as to what's on the list. And this is a rather different list to what you would typically find in that this list of blues and soul and funk is dominated by American first presses in most cases rather than Japanese. Although I am going to start with a few Japanese records just to get the ball rolling. So this is your blues, soul and funk list for this week. Let's get some interesting things. I'm going to start here. Professor Longhair. Now this is a hard cardboard gatefold. I love the inside. It gives you an idea. Professor Longhair, or Fess as he liked, as he was nicknamed, was a New Orleans soul and funk piano player. He kind of flew under the radar compared to other New Orleans funk and soul musicians, the likes of Fats Domino, etc. And he was making music all the way from the 50s, but in the mid to late 70s, he kind of had a little bit of a reincarnation because he would play at the New Orleans Mardi Gras. And the story behind this record is to do with this guy here, Albert Goldman. Now, Albert Goldman was the music critic for Esquire magazine, and he was considered to be a rather egotistical character, had his detractors, let's just say. Robert Christgau, the other, well, not the other, but one of the most renowned music critics of all time, and certainly in the 70s, in his review of this record that he gave an A rating, which is pretty rare, he describes Albert Goldman as, quote, an odious character. Well, Albert Goldman persuaded a record company, I'm not sure which one, I'm not sure, I can't remember which label this is on, to send some folks down to record Professor Longhair and his band at the 1978 Mardi Gras. And the unfortunate thing is that this was his last ever recording, the last Mardi Gras, because the 1979 Mardi Gras was cancelled. I can't remember the weather. And then he passed away in 1980 when he was 61, peacefully in his sleep. So this is by far and away the best recorded Professor Longhair record, and it's an absolute delight. It's so fun. It's up and hip and funky and fun. I like his voice. It's a double LP. It's a cracker, and not many people will have that in their collection. And it's got some interesting cover versions. So, for example, cover version of Muddy Waters, Got My Mojo Working, or, classics like Shake, Rattle and Roll, or old American funk records, or not funk records, soul and blues records like Stagger Lee, which then became Stagger Lee by Nick Cave, of course. Tipatina is the most famous song by Roy Bird, but it's great. Anyway, if you like New Orleans funk and soul, the music that inspired the Meters and others, then it's a great record. Now, that record is a New Orleans record. This is a London record. This is Muddy Waters, the London Sessions. Look at that sleeve. Hard cardboard, Japanese first press. So this was kind of part of those series of records where blues musicians, particularly Chicago blues musicians, would go to London and hook up with whoever was in town. In this case, the likes of Mitch Mitchell from Jimi Hendrix Experience, and Stevie Winwood from Traffic. Rory Gallagher plays guitar on quite a few of these tunes. Yeah, it's a really fun. There's Muddy. Really fun and interesting and enjoyable blues record. And then the third and final Japanese record on the Japanese pressing on tonight's list is this, Charlie Mingus's Bluebird. This record was recorded in 1970. One of two records that Charlie recorded in his time in Paris. The other being this is a really tough one to pronounce, but Philocampicus erectus. I can't remember exactly how that first word is pronounced, but yeah, this is one of two. Look at that sleeve. This is a I think it's either 1976 or 1978 repress. Charlie Mingus, of course, on bass, Bobby Jones on tenor sax, Eddie Preston on trumpet. Real kind of post-bop, really enjoyable actually, really quite accessible. I played a couple of the songs whilst I was preparing this list actually, and yeah, very enjoyable it is. Now, we're going to have a pretty hard pivot now to a bunch of funk and soul records that are almost exclusively US first presses, and a lot of artists that are very dear and close to my heart as the person who delivers these lists to you. You're going to recognize some names, but maybe not so much the records. I think that's what makes it interesting. So, for example, this is Idris Muhammad, Boogie to the Top, one of the greatest funk drummers of all time. And this record, Boogie to the Top, was kind of like a kind of halfway house between the funk that he was an absolute master of, but this kind of transitions a little bit into the disco scene. It's on the wonderful yellow Kudu label. It has some really, really interesting things. The standout track, bar none, and it's not even close, is the title track, which is about 10 or 11 minutes long. Lots of percussion breaks and really interesting sounds. It's not a million miles away from some of the Herbie Hancock type music from that period. Yeah, it's really enjoyable and rare, hard to find. This is the US first press. It's still in the shrink wrap. The record's great. Yeah, really fun record. Now this one is got a little bit of weird things going on the sleeve. I'll show you what I mean. So this is Desitively Bonnaroo by Dr. John. Can you see the big sticker that says promo copy only? And it's stuck on the label as well. Suggested cuts for airplay. Dr. John. Everybody want to get rich. Quitters never win. And let's make a better world. They're the three that the record label, which in this case was Atco, suggested that radios should play. And you can see here the stamp. It's almost certainly a radio pressing. And you can see the beautiful sleeve. This record features Alan Toussaint, of course, on keyboards and percussion, just kind of that New Orleans legend, but also Leo Nocentelli, who was the guitarist for the Meters. He plays guitar on this record. Arthur Neville of the Neville Brothers, also in the Meters, plays organ. So there's a real kind of overlap of the musicians that were driving this amazing music at the time. Can you see there? Property of WTCO. I suspect that's the radio station in the US that had this record. Produced and arranged by Alan Toussaint. Decisively Bonnaroo. It's basically a full-on party record. As is this. This is Barabbas, also US First Press. Barabbas were a funk band from the early to mid 70s that mixed in kind of salsa overtones to their music. And this record, I've had this one in my collection for ages, not a US First Press. I had an Aussie press. And I put it on, and again, this is on Atco Records, who really specialised in that beautifully recorded, melodic, upbeat, funky sound. And this record completely delivers. The Spanish musicianship, kind of, you can feel it. It's very infectious. It's a really cool sleeve as well. Very hard to find. Yeah, Barabbas. This record is a compilation of, I think, the best songs from their first 3 records. So yeah, really interesting. Okay, more US First Presses. This is the when Australia would import US First Presses. This corner was clipped. I've read various theories about this, but I think the most likely scenario is it was meant to indicate that a record was an import and to differentiate it from the Australian records at the time. This is on ABC Records, and this is Clarence Carter's A Heartful Song. Really wonderful soul singer, and A Heartful Song was certainly, I'm pretty certain it was his best-selling record. I think pretty clearly his best record as well. Beautiful, beautiful US First Press of that. This is also a US First Press. And for those of you who watched my list of the 5 greatest soul albums of all time, you'll know that this record was floating around, didn't quite make the top 5, but was in the mix. And that's Al Green's Call Me on High Records with the legendary Willie Mitchell. Part of the reason this record's so great is that it was right in the prime of Al Green's career with I'm Still in Love with You and Let's Stay Together. But many people consider this to be his best. Now, this is the US First Press on the original High Records. It's in fabulous condition. Bit of wear on the sleeve, as is the case for US presses and Aussie presses. But it's a really wonderful thing. And a great, great, great record. Al Green, US First Press of Call Me. A few more funk and soul records to go. This is Swamp Dogg. Finally caught up with myself on the Music Core label. Swamp Dogg being effectively kind of the stage name or performance name of Jerry Williams Jr., who was an amazing producer. And you can hear that in this record. Swamp Dogg, you can see it there. Swamp Dogg and the Riders of the New Funk. So it's kind of very bass heavy, lots of drop beats. And he's a great singer and songwriter, Swamp Dogg. Talking about great singers and songwriters, this is an interesting one because Bill Withers had 3 records to start a career that would equal with any 3 first cabs off the rank of any singer-songwriter ever. Just As I Am, Still Bill, and then Live at Carnegie Hall. And the records that he released later in the 70s before he retired are somewhat neglected and probably a little bit unfairly so. this record, Naked and Warm, is a delight. It's kind of it's a little bit less acoustic than the classic kind of opening salvos that he put out. More synthesizer, more not so much synthesizer, more organ and guitar, but still pretty ambitious and some really interesting instrumentation. So on 4 or 5 of these tracks, Dorothy Ashby plays harp, and she's an extraordinary musician. The highlight of this record is the 3rd track on side 2, which is just shy of 11 minutes long, called City of the Angels. And I'm a Bill Withers fan, and I think it is the equal of anything, if not the better, of anything he ever recorded. Yeah, Bill Withers, Naked and Warm. Really unusual to find an artist of his stature that has really good records that are so under the radar. Now, this record isn't under the radar. This is a cult record. I also spoke about this on my best 5 soul albums of all time. This is David Porter's Victim of the Joke. Now, this is the US first press, which features, as you can see, a dancing clown, albeit only not very well held together by now. But you can kind of see such an odd sleeve that I think encapsulates an odd and brilliant record. A concept album of the breakup of a relationship where the music is interspersed with these really quite incredible vocal performances, as in actors. It's hard to explain, but it's really should give it a go. And again, in the same way that City of the Angels, this kind of 10-minute plus opus, is the heart and soul of Naked and Warm, the Bill Withers record. In this case, I'm afraid the masquerade is over. 9 minutes and 43 seconds. The closing track on side 1 is truly phenomenal. There you go. That is US first press of David Porter's Victim of the Joke, an opera. All right, with 3 more to go. Look at this. Reincarnation by Exuma. Now we're moving funk and soul more in the direction of psychedelia. And a really, look at this. Can you see this? What an odd thing. There's the full gatefold fold out of Exuma's Reincarnation. Kind of quite accessible. If your opening track is Brown Girl in the Sand, it's not that you're creating something that is not accessible, but as it goes on, it becomes more and more idiosyncratic, guitar-driven, psychedelic and strange, and therefore rather lovely, and on the Kama Sutra label too. All right, 2 more records to go. The Main Ingredient, Shame on the World. Now, we're not so much in funk as we are in straight up soul with The Main Ingredient. One of their later records, smooth, mellow. Look at the 3 folks on the back. I've got some club members who swear by The Main Ingredient and say they're wonderful, but I've not really delved too much into them. If you do grab this record, I'd love to know what you think. And then finally, something really rather odd and interesting. So this is Almighty Fire, Aretha Franklin's 1978 record on Atlantic Records. Lead guitar, Curtis Mayfield. That's all you need to know. So Curtis Mayfield's all over this record. Now, why am I excited about this? You can see here, so instead of the corner clip that we saw in Clarence Carter, in this case you get the nudge out to show that it's an import. But this record is still sealed from 1978. So there you go. A really rather idiosyncratic and unusual blues and soul list this week. But there you go. I think there might be some things to explore in there. Definitely more of a crate digger's delight. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching as always. If anything catches your eye, drop me a line. Otherwise, keep an eye out on Wednesday at 9 p.m. Thanks a lot.